Lewis Hamilton just got slammed with official FIA sanctions, and it's all because of what Ferrari tried to hide. After his terrifying crash in Abu Dhabi, new evidence has surfaced showing critical structural failures in the SF-25. The FIA didn't just take notes, they took action. The ruling is brutal. Sanctions confirmed, grid penalties enforced, and Hamilton's final Grand Prix with Ferrari just became a survival mission. Subscribe now because this scandal isn't over, and what's coming next could change Hamilton's entire Formula One future. In a stunning turn of events just hours before the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, the FIA has officially sanctioned Lewis Hamilton following the emergence of new technical evidence tied to his Friday crash and Ferrari's questionable handling of the aftermath. What initially seemed like an unfortunate off for Hamilton during free practice has now developed into a regulatory bombshell. According to the FIA's late-night bulletin, Ferrari failed to report and correct structural anomalies in Hamilton's SF-25, and the data trail proves it. The timing of the decision couldn't be worse. It's Hamilton's final race with Ferrari, and he's now starting from the back of the grid. The investigation was launched after FIA technical delegates reviewed telemetry from Hamilton's FP2 crash, where the car violently bottomed out over the curbs at turn 14 before slamming into the barrier. The initial concern was safety-related, but what they found raised deeper questions. The suspension response, chassis flex, and plank were all deviated from Ferrari's own baseline. Even more suspiciously, Hamilton's car had been fitted with a modified floor for Abu Dhabi, a new spec that was reportedly not listed in the official scrutineering documents submitted on Friday morning. Once that discrepancy surfaced, the FIA began a thorough analysis, pulling radio transcripts, car setup logs, and performance comparisons with Charles Leclerc's car. What they discovered was damning. The floor upgrade had failed under load, triggering underbody instability, porpoising, and abnormal tire degradation during both FP1 and FP2. But instead of withdrawing or repairing the car under park firm rules, Ferrari attempted to recalibrate Hamilton's suspension settings to mask the problem. That move directly violated Article 3.5 of the technical regulations. In their official statement, the FIA cited Ferrari's failure to disclose a critical structural change and determined that Hamilton's car operated outside the defined safety and compliance window. This not only jeopardized his own safety, but also compromised the fairness of FP2's long-run simulations, where Hamilton logged race pace times that now confirmed came from an illegally configured floor. The stewards noted that Ferrari had an obligation to report and correct any structural compromise, and their failure to do so constituted a breach of competitive conduct. The sanction was immediate. Hamilton will serve a 5-place grid penalty for Sunday's race and receives an official reprimand for participating in a session with a non-compliant car. In addition, Ferrari has been issued a fine and must submit updated technical documentation ahead of FP3. While the team avoided a full disqualification due to their cooperation during the investigation, the damage to Hamilton's race prospects is clear. He'll start outside the top 10 with a car that still hasn't demonstrated consistent race pace on high fuel loads. This bombshell completely changes the outlook for Ferrari's final race of the season. With Leclerc now their only contender near the front and Hamilton forced into damage limitation mode, all strategic options have shifted. Ferrari had planned to use a 2-car strategy to attack the podium and defend against McLaren's Constructors' Championship Challenge. That's now off the table. Hamilton, for his part, enters his final drive for the Scuderia not as a hero, but at the center of a controversy that will hang over the team all winter. For Hamilton, this isn't just a setback, it's a personal blow. After a difficult season marked by inconsistency and missed opportunities, he had hoped to end his Ferrari chapter with a strong statement. Instead, he finds himself on the back foot, facing a compromised setup, public scrutiny, and one last race that now feels more like damage control than redemption. And with his 2026 Mercedes return looming, the spotlight has never been harsher. In FP2, Lewis Hamilton logged what initially appeared to be one of his strongest long-run simulations in recent memory. His average lap time on the medium compound hovered around 1 minute 28 seconds, just a few tenths off the Red Bulls and ahead of the McLarens. But after the FIA's deep dive into the telemetry, that pace is now understood in a very different context. The performance was not just surprising, it was misleading because the floor on Hamilton's SF-25 was generating illegal levels of downforce due to flexing outside permitted tolerances. The data showed unusually high vertical displacement readings through the high-speed sections of Sector 2, particularly in turns 9 and 11. Hamilton's ride height fluctuated more than his teammates by over 4 millimeters, a gap that suggests floor instability. Under normal conditions, Ferrari sets both cars within a tight margin of vertical travel, especially on a circuit like Yas Marina, where bottoming out can destroy balance. Yet in FP2, Hamilton's car seemed to ride lower and more consistently than Leclerc's, suggesting the flexing floor was allowing more airflow underneath, and therefore more grip. What made things worse was the timing of the issue. Just before the crash at turn 14, Hamilton had radioed in that the car was feeling inconsistent over the curbs and that the rear felt disconnected under load. The FIA's overlay of steering angle and torque response confirmed the sudden snap that occurred as Hamilton exited the corner. Instead of absorbing the bump, the floor appeared to bottom out and rebound erratically, unloading the rear axle and throwing the car into the barriers. It was not driver error, it was structural failure. During long-run simulations earlier in the session, the same underlying issue was likely masked by the tire condition and low fuel loads. But looking at lap 7 and lap 9 of Hamilton's run, a pattern begins to emerge. Each lap showed incrementally better traction out of low-speed corners, a signal that the floor was adapting mid-run. That kind of performance gain under repeat conditions is not normal, and it's what triggered the FIA to investigate further. It wasn't about one corner, it was a systemic failure that improved performance before ultimately ending in a crash. Hamilton's sector times also revealed inconsistencies not present in Leclerc's data. In Sector 1, he was consistently 0.3 faster despite using the same engine mode and fuel offset. That's unheard of in equal machinery, unless one car is behaving in a fundamentally different way aerodynamically. The FIA traced this down to the new floor's edge stiffness and under-tray design, both of which appeared to flex beyond tolerances set under Appendix 4 of the technical regulations. The advantage may have been unintentional, but it still affected fairness. The penalty now reshuffles the grid significantly. With Hamilton dropping 5 places, it moves Carlos Sainz and George Russell further up and strengthens McLaren's chance of securing a podium on pure track position. Ferrari, who had pinned hopes on a two-pronged strategy against Mercedes and Aston Martin, now has only one driver in attack range Leclerc. The loss of Hamilton's data reference and track presence complicates tire strategy, undercut timing, and even DRS tactics, as Leclerc now faces the front battle alone. As for Hamilton, the ramifications go beyond Sunday. This is not how he envisioned closing his Ferrari chapter, fighting from a midfield with a car under suspicion and a team trying to explain a regulatory breach. It casts a shadow on what could have been a final statement of defiance or class. Instead, Hamilton must salvage whatever he can from a compromised starting position, in car that not only betrayed his trust, but also triggered sanctions that could haunt Ferrari well into the off-season. The FIA's investigation into Hamilton's SF25 began with a routine post-crash inspection, but quickly escalated once irregular, where patterns and flex signatures were discovered underneath the car. When Hamilton's chassis was brought back to the scrutineering bay after FP2, engineers noted deformation in the plank area and excessive abrasion on the left rear under tray. This alone wouldn't necessarily trigger a penalty. Damage can occur during off-track excursions, but when matched with Hamilton's long-run data, the evidence became much harder to dismiss. To confirm their suspicions, the FIA used high-speed laser scanning to measure floor deflection and flex patterns under simulated downforce loads. This is standard protocol when a structural legality concern arises. The floor of Hamilton's car showed deformation beyond the allowable 2 mm tolerance set by the technical regulations. This wasn't random damage, it was consistent with a part that flexed repeatedly during high-speed runs, particularly in Sector 2. That gave Hamilton extra ground effect grip, potentially explaining his impressive long-run pace. The real breakthrough came when comparing Hamilton's floor to Leclerc's. While both drivers were supposed to run the same spec in Abu Dhabi, the FIA found discrepancies in material stiffness and edge bonding techniques. Essentially, the floor under Hamilton's car behaved like a flexible aero component, something explicitly banned under Article 3.15, which prohibits movable aerodynamic devices. Even though Ferrari claimed it was an unintended variation, the FIA ruled that the effect was performance-enhancing and constituted a breach of Article 3.5 regarding component legality. What also worked against Ferrari was the lack of transparency in their documentation. When teams submit setup sheets and component declarations on a race weekend, those files are supposed to detail any updates, tolerances, and changes. In Hamilton's case, the floor had been reinforced using a different carbon weave pattern for added rigidity, but this wasn't listed in the original declaration. That omission violated the scrutineering process itself, as outlined under Article 12.1.1.c of the FIA International Sporting Code. From a precedent standpoint, this case sends a strong message. The FIA has taken similar action in the past, notably against Red Bull in 2021 and Aston Martin in 2023, but this time the scrutiny was intensified by the fact that Hamilton's issue occurred during a live session and led to a crash. That raised the stakes dramatically. It wasn't just about technical compliance, it became a matter of driver safety and team accountability. As a result, the penalty was more than symbolic. It came with grid consequences and a formal reprimand. The implications stretch into the 2026 regulatory horizon. With F1 preparing for a new era of active aero, sustainable materials, and simplified floor designs, this incident serves as a reminder of how tightly teams will need to manage tolerances. The FIA is expected to implement even stricter load testing procedures, particularly after teams push the limits of floor flexibility to extract performance without detection. Ferrari's breach has likely accelerated those plans, and other teams are now reviewing their floor specs to avoid similar fallout. For Hamilton, the ruling represents more than just a penalty. It's a blemish on a farewell weekend that was meant to celebrate his time with Ferrari. The technical nature of the breach means that, regardless of his driving performance, questions will linger about whether his car was legal in previous races where similar components were used. It's a bitter end to a difficult season, and one that reinforces how in today's Formula One, performance is no longer just about the driver, it's about how clean your car is under the FIA's microscope.